Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the series on the Heart Sutra. And we're going to be, again, moving on through the Sutra of the Heart of the Glorious Lady Prajñāpāramitā today. And we're going to be moving into Śāriputra's question to Noble Avalokiteśvara. So before we get started, we're just going to move right into it and start with our refuge and then generating great compassion and then beseeching our lineage so that this teaching goes really well. And then we will get right into the teaching for hopefully about the next hour or so. So I'm not going to explain a lot of the prayers today. I'm just going to move right into it so we have a lot of time for the teaching. So first, it's a refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And now great compassion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as space, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. And now the lineage supplications. Pung, on the northwest border of the country of Dhyana, on the pollen heart of a lotus flower. The marvelous supreme accomplishment has been attained. You are renowned as the lotus-born, surrounded by a retinue of many dakinis, following you to be like you. I beseech you to come and bless me, Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. I beseech the great Vajradhara, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pakma Drupa, and Lord Drakumpa, at the feet of the root guru who possesses the three ways of kindness, and all the root gurus and spiritual masters of the lineage, the Yidams and Dharma protectors, may your marvelous blessings permeate my mind and our minds. Lama, care for me. Lama, care for me. Oh, Lama, care for me. Lama, care for us. Lama, care for us. Oh, Lama, care for us. Okay, so last week we went through the first paragraph, and just to bring us all into the same context, virtue in the beginning, middle, and end, or purity in the beginning, middle, and end. So we started with the title. Well, we started with an introduction, and then we went through the title, which is virtue or purity in the beginning. And then we're now in the virtue and purity in the middle, which is the main text, and we've already gone through the first paragraph of this text. So now we're about to go into the next section, and this section is really laying out the heart of the Buddha and how he can also interact, or how this Buddha nature interacts with both human beings, the monks, in this case Śāriputra's question, and then also interacts with the bodhisattvas, which in this case is Avalokiteśvara. We talked about that a little bit last week. Again, in different readings of this text, we can view Avalokiteśvara as a perfected Buddha himself and a symbolic deity, as a deity that is not a deity in a traditional sense, but is a symbolic representation of an aspect of Buddha nature or aspects of Buddha nature. And also, if not that, then a bodhisattva that has reached a certain stage of development where they're only showing a light body, for example, and are not embodied in a human form, but have various other types of attributes. We can also read it as that as well. Or potentially, if we take sort of the least view on it, or the lesser view on it, we could also see Avalokiteśvara as potentially just a human being, or a normal embodied sentient being. But along with a lot of this stuff, if we can widen our minds, again, to put it into this context, this is all our minds. The Heart Sutra is all of the stories happening within our minds. It starts with the sentence, "Thus I have heard," and this is describing things that are happening within our minds. The context of our entire experience is our own mind. Our own mind is what we experience everything through. And this nature that is being described here, as well as all of the various attributes, are things that are applicable directly in our experience right here, right now, in our minds. So if we bring ourselves into that context, we can get the most out of this. We can have a greater understanding of what Buddha is, what Buddha nature is, and how it connects to us immediately right now. So we talked a little bit about that last time with the Bhagavan entering the samadhi of enumerations, a phenomena called perception of the profound, and then somehow by the Buddha being in this mental samadhi, this restful state, that was the moment that Avalokiteśvara recognized that the five skandhas are empty of nature. So something about this Buddha nature, this samadhi, this restful state, actually influences other minds. It operates on a non-dual framework, whereas normally in our lives we think of ourselves in a dualistic framework. I, me, you're you. We have all these, animals as well as other human beings. We're all separate. But this samadhi of the enumerations of phenomena, called perception of the profound, seems to go beyond that type of dualistic perspective, and influences, at least at the beginning, this higher being of Avalokiteśvara, this bodhisattva, potentially perfected Buddha already, and his own practice of the profound Prajñāpāramitā, which we talked about last week. Now we're going to go now into how this also affects a human being at the time, and this person is Śāriputra. So I'm going to read the next paragraph, and then we're going to go line by line, similar to how we went in the last couple weeks. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Śāriputra spoke thus to noble Avalokiteśvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. How should a son of noble family or a daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajñāpāramitā? So Śāriputra is asking Avalokiteśvara, the Buddha of compassion, about this practice of the profound Prajñāpāramitā that in the preceding paragraph, Avalokiteśvara had recognized the five skandhas, being the five sense inputs, to be empty of nature, both the objects of the sense inputs and the sense inputs themselves as empty of nature. So what's interesting about this is that it says, through the power of the Buddha. Through the power of the Buddha, Śāriputra asked this question. Well, that's interesting because the Buddha was described in the previous paragraph as being in the samadhi of enumerations of phenomena called perception of the profound. When we understand that, what we understand is that this Buddha it's not like he got up and said, hey, Śāriputra, can you ask this question? He's still in this samadhi, but this samadhi, this restful state, enabled this question to arise in a otherwise perceived, what we would perceive as a separate mind, separate entity. How is that possible? Well, we're starting to get into the understanding of what this Buddha nature is, or in this case, what his powers are. So what ended up happening was that Śāriputra, within this mind, the same mind that you and I are accessing right now, and when we're experiencing this video for you, or I'm teaching the video for me, that mind has the ability to be empowered by the samadhi of enumerations of phenomena that the Buddha himself is experiencing, and we individually are not. We can be influenced by that just by the nature of the mind itself. And that is really, really powerful. If we can open our minds in that way, we can start to recognize that our minds are not dualistic objects. Our mind is something altogether different. It is what we experience the world, our entire universe through, but it's also interconnected with and interdependent with everything else around us. And it can access the power of the Buddha. Similarly, the Buddha himself or itself is something that is operating in its nature on that layer, in that layer, permeating that layer. Now, even right now, you're watching this video, the Buddha, him, her, itself is permeating this moment in time. Always. But we just haven't recognized it so far. So Śāriputra might have, the writer of the Sutra certainly did, and is ascribing the power of the Buddha to move Śāriputra to speak and to ask this question. So now we have to ask ourselves, well, what's so special about Śāriputra? Is he actually special? Well, Śāriputra was a monk. He was one of the historical Buddha's top disciples, if not the top disciple. He was, by all means, the disciple with the highest wisdom. And there is a sutra that goes into the life story of him and his closest second disciple, which was Magliyana. The two of them, Śāriputra and Magliyana, were basically best friends and had gone on a journey over the course of their lives to try and find the truth. Now, what we want to really get at is, how does Śāriputra access this Buddha nature? Was there something special that he was doing here? And the core of this, especially for us lay people, possibly those that haven't taken any monk's vows, we're not planning on taking monk's vows at this point. It might feel like, it was just because he was a monk. But it's not exactly the case. Śāriputra, which the part that drove Śāriputra historically in the sutra about his life and Magliyana's life, the thing that moved them to go try to find the Buddha was impermanence, recognizing impermanence. They looked around themselves and saw that, and they were both actually quite great scholars already in the Vedas, and they had some amount of spiritual realization that others were drawn to, and they had disciples themselves, but they recognized that there was an impermanence here. They were going to die. All of their disciples were no longer going to be showering them with flowers. Also, potentially the showering with flowers, they were going to be dead. They couldn't enjoy that anymore anyway. And so both of them were disheartened and recognized we don't have the solution for impermanence. And out of that, they began to experience a great amount of renunciation. For, in Buddhist terminology and as well as other dharmic schools, samsara. They began to feel a tremendous amount of renunciation for samsara, which is, to the rest of us who haven't studied a lot of that, it's the mundane world. It's the mundane world that since we were born and strive to make a living for ourselves, be happy in this life, that eventually we will die. And that remembrance of impermanence then, for some of us, drives us to a place of renunciation. We cannot find permanent joy here. There must be something beyond this mundane world, this very impermanent aspect of reality that can provide us with some amount of support in spite of the fact of samsara's impermanence. And so these two, Śāriputra and his best friend, went searching for a teacher. And they found a teacher that had some amount of realization before the historical Buddha. And then, depending on the source of the sutra, whether or not it's the Pali Canon or it's a Tibetan, there are various different reasons given on why they stopped being his student. One was that he passed away himself. Another one is that they recognized that he didn't have all the answers. Whatever the case is, eventually they moved to become disciples of the Buddha. And there's a story about them meeting one of the Buddha's disciples and recognizing immediately his qualities, this other monk's qualities, and we're, of course, drawing the Buddha, and the rest is history, so to speak. So Śāriputra then becomes a disciple of the Buddha and learns the Four Noble Truths and works hard as his attendant and gains realization over the course of, I believe the story that I was reading earlier was 2 weeks, by fanning the Buddha and listening to one of his teachings. So there is this aspect of devotion, the fanning of the Buddha, compassion and devotion, right? As well as then hearing the teachings and awakening to them. So that's all who this Śāriputra figure is. There's probably, we could talk endlessly. We could do endless study on Śāriputra. But for this, the most important thing about Śāriputra is that he has renunciation, understanding of impermanence, and some amount of devotion to the Buddha. Those things awaken his ability to be open to the Buddha speaking through him. Now, what's interesting about that for us is that we all have that potential. None of us don't have that potential. When we look at impermanence, when we look at our lives, we recognize that we will all eventually pass away. Our loved ones, all of our money, all of our concerns will eventually be left behind. And recognizing that provides us with an opportunity to let them go. Now, the way that we let them go varies for each of us. Some of us let that go in their minds primarily. Others let them go through radical means. For example, giving all their money away and going and becoming monks, going and living in a monastery. There are many means. It doesn't have to be as extreme as any of these, but the most important thing is that we need to develop some amount of renunciation. Renunciation that this world can and is going to provide sustainable joy to us. It's not. We're not going to have sustainable joy in the world that is compounded. The world where we have in this case, 5 skandhas, all of our senses. These senses that we have, we like certain things to occur, and we don't like other things to occur. We cannot make things that we like occur forever on the basis of just liking that they occur. And if we chase our likes continuously, eventually we get old and we're going to have to let go of our likes anyway. If I liked chocolate ice cream, for example, that was the one love of my life, I could go and put chocolate ice cream every day in my freezer, but eventually I would die and my chocolate ice cream would not be eaten anymore. And that, recognizing that, might help me recognize that this love of chocolate ice cream is never going to get me to nirvana, right? It's never going to get me to any place that is sustainably joyful. So it's not that I don't have chocolate ice cream. I actually enjoyed some ice cream earlier, right before this teaching. It's not that you need to throw away all your ice cream now. But when we eat our ice cream, if we realize, oh, this is not something necessarily that is going to bring me permanent joy because of impermanence, the nature of things, then when we have ice cream, we enjoy it. But when we don't have ice cream, we should enjoy that too. We should learn how to do that. And this is actually kind of what a monk does. The monks of the historical Buddha took various types of discipline, and they worked on their meditation, their concentration, to tame some of these desires, for example, some of their anger and some of their ignorance, that they would naturally gravitate towards things that aren't going to bring sustainable value. So instead of that, they practice cessation, meditation, meditative concentration. And that meditative concentration got them to a place where Śāriputra could recognize renunciation, have some amount of renunciation, and also feel some amount of devotion to this Buddha, not just in the Buddha person, human being looking Buddha, but also the Buddha nature of everything. The nature of this samadhi restfulness that can permeate everything, and that actually in this restful mind state, there might be some realization to be found where one can be imbued and also permeated and permeating all reality, and not in this compounded way. One can access the primordial nature of things and never, in that nature of things, never have to get caught up in the compounded fixations anymore. Now, it doesn't mean, again, not enjoying the compounded things, but not fixating to them anymore. Allowing what will be to be, and being in a place of peace, a place of grounded joy. So we have that ability to be Śāriputra. So right now, when we read this, when we recite this, imagine being Śāriputra. Put the Śāriputra hat on, the body on. Think, I'm Śāriputra, maybe. I can be Śāriputra. Additionally, I can be Avalokiteśvara. Additionally, I can be the Buddha. You can be the Buddha. You can be Avalokiteśvara. You can be Śāriputra. Now the question is, which one of those isn't Buddha nature? What we've read so far is that each one of these is Buddha nature. The power of the Buddha caused Śāriputra to ask this question. The samadhi of the enumerations of the profound caused, it doesn't say cause, but at that moment, Avalokiteśvara recognized the skandhas to be empty of nature. Now, this is very radical. When we recognize it, we can start to recognize something of the three spheres. The Nirmanakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Dharmakaya. Now, we could go for a long, long talk about the definition of each of those. If you're interested, you can look that up on Google. You can find out you can self-teach about that. To put it briefly, the Nirmanakaya form is the relative form. It's the form that you see right now. If you were to be here, right, in this room, and you were to come over and touch my flesh, like, oh yeah, he's a human being. That person right there is human, and that's Śāriputra. Śāriputra is the human. We're human, and what we need as a relative form to be able to access or perfect our Buddha nature, so it imbues our relative form, is we need to have devotion, but we need to have renunciation and a recognition of impermanence. Out of that, Śāriputra took the monastic precepts. There are lay precepts that we can take. Those are vows. You can take vows if you want to be a relative, outward-looking human Buddhist. You don't have to do that if you don't want to become a relative, outward-looking Buddhist. But it's helpful. It's helpful because if you do take even just one precept, such as not killing or not stealing, not taking what is not given, not lying, not becoming intoxicated, and not having sexual misconduct. If you take one of those lay precepts, you just say, from now on, I'm never going to do that. Or you temporarily do occasionally. From today until this time tomorrow, you take a lay precept. Then you are actually practicing an act of renunciation. That is a vow of renunciation. In that, you create in your body form a ability to reflect, embodied in your body form, reflect Buddha nature. That might sound radical, but it's actually not that radical, because the Buddha himself had basically done that for a very long period of time. Practice renunciation, recognizing impermanence. That this is, part of this process. So, but this, once you see that this is the Nirmanakaya form, on the outward relative level, you can appear as a Buddha Or you can appear as somebody that is a disciple of the Buddha, a Buddha emanation, and somebody that's permeated with Buddha nature. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. The way you do that on a relative form is by becoming like Śāriputra, having renunciation and a recognition of impermanence and devotion for the Buddha. The vow that most makes that occur is the refuge vow, where you take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And then it also is the precepts which connects you with the historical Buddha as well. Now, then there's the inner Buddhist. Now, what's interesting about this is that the inner Buddhist is like Avalokiteśvara. Avalokiteśvara. Who's Avalokiteśvara? What is this inner Buddhist thing you're talking about? Well, it's the Sambhogakaya form. It's the pure Sambhogakaya. What is the pure Sambhogakaya? It's the inner emotions being purified. It's the recognition of the five skandhas to be empty of nature. And the basis of that is having compassion. Avalokiteśvara is the Buddha of compassion. Which basically means you can't recognize emptiness unless you have compassion. If you want to recognize all also of your emotions and your thoughts as empty of nature, you have to have compassion. The reason that you have to have compassion is because the thing that is getting in your way on an inner basis is fixation to a self, fixation to a me. And specifically, fixation to my own wants, my own desires, my own enjoyment over everyone else's. So on an inner wavelength, if you want to become a Sambhogakaya, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, you can do that without taking these, being an outer version, right? Now, I don't necessarily think you do or do not have to do that, but you can be somebody of any religion, really. And as long as you have compassion and you practice great compassion, then the Buddha's samadhi of the enumerations of phenomena called perception, the profound, might actually reach you in your inner world and awaken you to recognize that the five sense objects, five sense inputs, are illusory, are empty. And in that, you also, out of this great compassion, will recognize not just that your own are empty, but everyone's are empty. And in that way, you can then be very close to then the direct recognition of Prajñāpāramitā, or in other words, the samadhi of the enumerations of phenomena called perception of the profound, that the Bhagavan or Buddha himself was resting in. So in that way, one with great compassion that creates great compassion, that is the source of the inner and secret. Secret is basically the ultimate realization of non-duality. The ultimate realization of the nature of mind, the nature of reality. That is in the ineffable truth that the Buddha himself recognized under the Bodhi tree. Those can be recognized if you have great compassion. If you meditate on great compassion, if you create causes of great compassion and you work on great compassion, that can occur. Now, and you will be very close to the Buddha. Now, there might be some discrepancies with some amount of outward appearance, right? You might not appear to be a Buddhist. You might have some issues there because you maybe haven't developed the renunciation. You haven't necessarily developed all of the understandings of impermanence and things like that Śāriputra has. So what generally occurs, and this is in the classical way back in this time where the Heart Sutra was written, and before that in the historical Buddhist time, what would occur was the monks themselves, well first, there would be a recognition of impermanence. There would be a recognition that samsara, or this world, doesn't have any permanent joy, right? If you just chase your desires, you're eventually going to have to let go of your objects of desire because of impermanence. So then you would go and you'd find a Buddhist teacher, or you'd go and find a Buddha if that was the time, and you would follow the Buddha as a monk, and you would develop meditative concentration, and then you would recognize eventually that the five skandhas were empty of nature. You eventually have to recognize compassion after you develop this meditative concentration. Then you would have to have compassion. You would recognize the five skandhas to be empty of nature, and then you would reach final enlightenment. And that process would be first developing this nirmanakaya, this relative Buddhist, and then the inner Buddhist, and then the secret Buddhist. That was how it was then. Now, in this time, this is something that is a little bit more connected to some of the masters in Tibet and their realization. There is an understanding that the time that we live in right now is called the degenerate age. And it's because we are very, very, very connected to samsara these days. Not only are we connected to it, we are whipped around by it constantly. We have desires that we feel so strongly about that we cannot let them go no matter what. We have so many distractions in our lives that we go from one to another, to another, to another, to another. Even if we were going to begin to recognize that impermanence, it feels like, right now I'm going to have a Dorito, and then, now there's a Lay's potato chip over here. I don't have to love just the Dorito. I can love the Lay's, and then I can go to this, and I can go to that. And it's distracted, like the TV and the movies and the games and the phone, and we can just go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And because of that, our worlds are constantly swirling with desire, swirling with interest, swirling with hobbies, swirling with what ifs, swirling with opportunities, but also swirling with misery and confusion and anger and frustration and worry and concern and all of that. It's so difficult to develop renunciation. And even if we did have an amount of renunciation, because of how strong these afflictions are in our lives, we do not have the energy. We do not have the self-control to be able to go like Śāriputra did, renounce our lives and wander off into the woods with this guy, Buddha Shakyamuni, the Holy One, and meditate under a tree for, let's say, 2 or 3 years. I mean, that is crazy, we would think, these days. So then this time, how it looks a little bit more is that first, especially because we also have more highly refined minds, like very technical oriented minds these days. We're all so technical and savvy and, very fine-tuned minds, very detailed minds. We were able to somehow put all this distraction stuff together into calendars and organizational flows and whole jobs and workforces and AI and all of that kind of stuff. So we have our minds are really, really fine-tuned in a way. Because of that, oftentimes what is best at this current point in time is to begin with the secret or the inner perspective, which is one of the reasons why we're teaching on the Heart Sutra here, why we're doing this teaching here, is because understanding emptiness starts to make everything else collapse. We can eventually take some vows like Śāriputra. We can do that after we've recognized emptiness and compassion unified. Once we recognize compassion and emptiness unified, the path of renunciation makes all the sense in the world, just sort of unfolds, possibly. Possibly it just starts to appear like the only thing that makes sense. It does not appear like the only thing that makes sense to a mind that is consumed by itself, which is what we kind of find ourselves in most of the time. So what that means is don't get too caught up with, I don't have enough renunciation, I don't know about this Buddhist stuff, I don't know if I want to take all these vows. That's okay. Don't worry about that right now. Worry about great compassion. Worry about focusing your mind on compassion. Additionally to focusing your mind on compassion is developing some amount of devotion for something that's not you. Something that's not me is a powerful thing. In my life, me trying to orient myself to the world all the time is exhausting work. And because of that, I am constantly bombarded with self-criticism, self-pressure, and also striving all the time. That's not very helpful to any kind of compassion. So having devotion for the universe, having devotion for the underlying nature of reality, the primordial nature of reality, that in this case we call the Buddha, in this case we call the Glorious Lady Prajñāpāramitā as well, this emptiness. If you have devotion for that, even if you don't know 100% yet what that means, but you know it's beyond you, it's beyond you, it's beyond me, it's beyond individuals, it's beyond the self. If we can have that kind of devotion imbued with compassion for all sentient beings, and now it's not that hard. All we need to do to start to have this compassion that Avalokiteśvara has is we need to only put our minds for a moment in the shoes of all of those people around us. Everybody around us right now has a swirling mind of concern, of confusion, of to-do lists, of regrets, of memories, of trauma, of wanting the world to be different than what it is. And that's if you have it good. Then there's all of those that have current sufferings. People in the hospital with strange diseases. People in war zones. People that don't have enough to eat. And people that are losing their jobs and don't know what to do and don't have the skills anymore. All we need to do is just for a moment start to put our minds with some of these. And it can be overwhelming to do in mass, the way I just kind of pointed out all these different issues. Even if you just take one group, say those people that are sick with breast cancer, right? My mother-in-law has breast cancer. If I extend that out to all of those beings all of those women that are experiencing that across the world. Well, I mean, maybe just across California, then maybe across, the United States, the world. I'm in California, so I mentioned that. And you go regional and then bigger and bigger and bigger. Even that, thinking, may those women no longer experience this disease anymore. I want to do everything I can to remove that from them. And then you recognize, well, I could go and become a doctor that does that, focuses on that. I could devote my whole life to just that issue. And then maybe change what you're thinking about. Oh, and all those people in the war zones. Well, you could also do that. You could devote yourself to, aid in war zones. But you can't do both. And you can't do both at the same time. So as you really bring this into your heart, you develop this compassion, you recognize the body's inadequacy, our own inadequacy, and you recognize this devotion. You can easily then turn your mind into this devotion. May all these beings be free of suffering, and I need help from far beyond me to do that. And actually, this me is clouded, is confused, doesn't know what to do, doesn't have any direction. So I now have devotion for this higher aspect. Out of that can come what in the Buddhist terminology we would call blessings. But others would maybe call that realization of the actual nature of things, the underlying, overlaying, all permeating nature of things. That is empty of nature, that is imbuing all things with compassion. That is this Buddha nature that is really beginning to come out of this text. So I went on a bit of a tangent, apparently, but actually it all connects to Śāriputra's question. How should a son of noble family or a daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajñāpāramitā? So a daughter or son of noble family is a person who's taken, in this case, it would mean a person that is on the Buddhist path in some way. What I'm saying to you is, if you're on the path of compassion, that's good enough for now. If you're interested in taking Buddhist precepts, please do. I rejoice in those. They are wonderful. Taking Buddhist vows are wonderful. They are awesome. But a lot of people these days are interested in that because they're concerned about them. They're concerned also that they can't live up to them. And they have a lot of self-pressure about taking those. So for those that feel that and that worry about those types of things right now and they aren't ready for that kind of commitment, it's okay. Don't worry. Don't be concerned. Don't let it stop your compassion. Start with compassion. So you are a son or daughter of noble family if you are fostering compassion. I can guarantee you. Then train. So how would they train? Who wishes, how would they train if they want to practice the profound Prajñāpāramitā? That's the question. And the reality is, if you start with, you are a noble family, you are part of the noble family, you have created the conditions so that you can train Prajñāpāramitā, It's only compassion. That's the only one that you need to train in. If you train in compassion, you are ready for the next paragraph. If you have a problem with compassion and you think, oh, I don't really want to save everybody, that's okay. Try to increase your compassion. Try to increase your compassion for those with attributes like those that you love, right? My mother-in-law has breast cancer. Well, now I just go extend that out with everyone who has breast cancer. That helps increase my compassion. And that's actually not so complicated. It's not so complicated. I'm not jumping all the way to scary alligators, for example. If you have a fear of alligators, I'm not going to alligators and saying, may they be happy, even though, I feel that myself. We can get there. We can definitely get there. I would invite you to, over time, get there. But if that's hard for you, if you have an issue with certain animals, for example, or certain attributes, because mean-hearted people, people that have bullied you, all that, forgiveness is hard, right? Start with generating great compassion for those that are stretching you outwards from those that you already have compassion for. Start there, and then widen, really just widen that, and then add more attributes and widen it, right? Widen it regionally, to the whole world, to the whole universe, and then just widen it. And then in your daily lives, as you see individuals that are suffering, when you find that you're having thoughts that are like, oh, that person's upset, right? Honking their horn. I got honked at today. I was going a little slower than someone else wanted at a stoplight, and someone honked at me. Sometimes that causes us to hate that person. And in this way, we can, if we recognize when we would otherwise lash out, we can increase our compassion. Oh, they're just having a bad day. Oh, they're just trying to get home to their loved ones. Oh, whatever, right? We can start to tell these stories that increase our compassion. Or they're not trying to do those things, but they're just having a bad time. Obviously, they're impatient. And that impatience is causing anxiety, causing tightness that then is causing them to press that horn. That tightness, that anxiety, we feel that. We feel that now. We feel that in various places in our lives, in our daily lives. We know how that feels. We don't want anyone to feel that way. We don't want us to feel that way. We don't want them to feel that way. So in this way, we can foster more and more compassion. With more and more compassion, we become more and more a son or daughter of noble family. We become more and more alike to the noble Avalokiteśvara, the Buddha of compassion, the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, which is the great, great Bodhisattva of compassion. We become more like that, which then enables us to then understand this next paragraph. And this next paragraph, which we're going to go through next week, is the heart of it. And I'm not sure we're going to go through the entire thing next week because there is a lot to it. We may, if we have time. But that is the core of emptiness, the core of Prajñāpāramitā, recognizing the innate purity, the innate transient purity that, and this is a sneak peek, the innate transient purity that is current, present, always present, and then also is appearing where? In this mind. In this mind, there is all of this phenomena. There are all of the 5 sense objects: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. all is happening. All of those things are happening presently. They are all intrinsically perfect, recognizing their intrinsic perfection as imbued with this underlying nature of the mind. All of this is happening in our minds. That is the context of this Prajñāpāramitā Sutra. It is the heart of Prajñāpāramitā Sutra. The emptiness is form and form is emptiness is happening in our minds. Emptiness is not just transience. It is, on one hand, transient impermanence, momentary impermanence, but also its underlying nature or imbued nature is from our minds. Our minds in themselves are not substantial, yet they are the mode that we experience everything with. Those words have a lot less meaning unless you have great compassion. Having great compassion unlocks the recognition of how this Buddha is able to communicate mind to mind to mind to mind to mind beyond thoughts, just in a samadhi, a rest, the samadhi of enumerations of phenomena, called perception of the profound. In that restful mind, our restful mind, your restful mind, my restful mind, everyone's restful minds, we can not only access the Buddha nature, we can become the Buddha nature. We can basically recognize what we always have been, which is the Buddha nature. And in that way, be not only connected with everyone else, and be also not harmed by all of the compounded stuff, like our bodies and things that will have to degrade, but also will be able to enact great activities and display great qualities across many, many different people, worlds, universe, the whole universe. That is what the Buddha nature does. That's what it is. And when you recognize that, then you can become that. You can see that, view that, and lose yourself. And I mean, oneself, the self that's holding us back by creating all sorts of different selfish perspectives. Lose that, let go of that, to then reestablish ourselves in this ultimate nature. And that is what's possible. But going back to this, then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Śāriputra spoke thus to noble Avalokiteśvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva: how should a son of a noble family or a daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajñāpāramitā? Śāriputra, renunciation, recognition of impermanence. We can all recognize that right now. We're not going to be able to take it with us. We're going to die one day. Renunciation. So I'm not going to keep chasing the stuff that I can't take with me. I'm not going to keep striving for attributes that are going to decay. Now I'm going to foster great compassion, like the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteśvara. And with that great compassion, I will recognize the nature of the sense objects to be empty. And in that, we will be connected in the nature of the mind, the ultimate nature of this samadhi. We can claim our samadhi of the Buddhas, the primordial Buddha nature. That's what's possible. That is what's possible. And it's all possible on the basis of your mind. This is your mind. You're experiencing this video in your mind. Everything you've ever experienced in your life is your mind. The only thing that's limiting you is your mind. And it doesn't have to limit you anymore. Foster great compassion. Recognize the ways it's already limiting you by clinging on to things that are impermanent. And we will get to the next paragraph next week. So, we're going to do a brief dedication. By this merit, may all attain perfect awakening, rising above all forces of negativity, going beyond the ocean of samsara. May we find liberation in the turbulent waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope some of these words have been helpful, have been directly applicable in your life, and have also given you some amount of confidence that no matter what kind of background you're from, that you can begin to apply this in your life. You can begin to seize the stronghold of realization, the Buddha nature, the Buddha's realization now, right now, without having to put all extra pressure on yourself. We don't need to do that. We can go step by step right now. So thank you again, and wishing you all the very best from the heart of the universe. All the love. Please be well.